All right, Chen, I apologize for the lateness on this one, but I wanted to give you a thorough video and just give you a little bit more detail and education because I know that you're interested in all of this and you're hungry to learn. So when it comes to deadlifts, a lot of people want to try to get their hips closer to the bar because that decreases the moment arm on their low back, which limits typically the amount of back pain that people see. Because it's going to limit the amount of force that your back has to put into it. However, we know that deadlifts are going to be a bit more back heavy, especially conventional deadlifts. So I saw a post that resonated a little bit by Doc Willie Dustin Wilson from Divergence about the sumo deadlift and how people are constantly trying to get their hips too close to the bar, and you really need to be able to buy space. So I want to explain to you a little bit more in depth about that buying space and what that means and why we do it. So, if we're setting up conventional, what we want to do is we want to get our hips back in space, right? That's what's going to get us a hinge. Now, what happens when we get our hips back in space and then we come down and we try to get our hips as close to the bar as possible, our hips are dropping down in space as our body rises, okay? And so then what happens is you end up getting a pull where your hips immediately shoot up first because you didn't start at the right hip height in the first place. The reason for that is you have lack of tension on your hamstrings due to active insufficiency, right? You're trying to tuck your pelvis as much as you can. What do your hamstrings do? They tuck your pelvis. Your knees are very flexed. What do your hamstrings do? They flex your knee. So because your hamstrings are a biarticular muscle, right? They cross two joints. If it is doing the same muscle action at both joints, it's going to create an insufficiency or a lack of ability to produce force out of that muscle. Hamstrings are a massive, massive muscle group used in the conventional deadlift. So for your wedge, what I want you to think about beyond creating space between your hips and the bar, because when we get our hips away, I'm going to get a massive stretch on my glutes, and that's going to allow me to produce some force as well, right? So I'm just setting all of my muscles up to be at optimal lengths, to be at an optimal length tension relationship so I can create the most force possible. So what I think about with my wedge is not necessarily about driving my hips towards the bar as much as I'm thinking about driving my knees forward, keeping my hips tall, and driving my knees forward and outward a little bit just to create that wedge between me and the bar to just kind of float it off the floor. So hopefully I won't damage anything in here. We're gonna give it a shot. So I'm down here, I'm grabbing the bar. I'm not thinking about leaning back against it because what happens when I do this? Now it becomes a squat, right? I'm trying to use my quads that won't be able to overcome all this force because they're not strong enough to do it. I need, in a deadlift, my quads, my hamstrings, my glutes, everything to work in conjunction with each other. So instead of dropping hips down to bar, I want you to think about keeping your hips high, and then what I think about doing is busting my knees or pressing my knees into the insides of my elbows. And that just breaks the bar off the floor using my quads, my glutes, my hamstrings, and then it's just a forceful press away from there. Let me know if that doesn't make sense. If you have any questions, we can chat deeper on it, but that's basically the long and the short of my deadlift wedging for you. In terms of the rest of it, it all looks good. Your spine position looks fine. I'm okay with a little bit of T-spine flexion in this, but yeah, that's the wedge.